You are listening to Vital 100, the podcast designed to take your health to the next level.
Hello again, this is Dr. Bob Johnson with Vital 100 podcast, and we have another very, very interesting, skilled practitioner here who is going to talk to us a little bit about his research. And when I first found out about our guest, whose name is Spencer Feldman, I was so intrigued that I knew I had to get him on this podcast. Welcome, Dr. Feldman.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Bob.
Very briefly, tell us a little bit about your background and your interests in the research on these different projects.
Well, my day job is I manufacture medical products, but I ended up getting divorced from a 17-year marriage, and as my marriage was collapsing, I started looking at it in the same way that I look at the health of a body, diagnostically. What's going wrong? What toxins are there that need to be removed? What nutrition isn't being delivered? How, from my lifestyle, am I not generating health? It's the same model that I started bringing towards relationships that had worked so successfully for me in a medical career. And so the first book that I think we're going to talk about today, The Four Gifts, was a compilation of kind of like my field notes, trying to observe and understand why relationships do what they do and how I might save the one I was in, or if I couldn't or didn't want to, what a healthy relationship might look like the next time I tried.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your research and your book, The Four Gifts.
Sure. Well, The Four Gifts, like all the books, and they're really more essays. They're only 10 or 12 pages long. They're all for free at spiritualsecretagent.com. And the Four Gifts, started with, why isn't my marriage working? And what I came to, I started looking at it, and actually a lot of marriages don't work. And a lot of people would cheat if they thought they could get away with it statistically. And so Disney suggests happily ever after, but it doesn't show you what happens after Cinderella dances with the prince. It doesn't show the bickering. It doesn't show the kids. It doesn't show the fighting. So I wanted to understand this more. The first thing I realized was DNA does not code us for long-term relationships. It codes us for diversity. And just to give you a quick explanation, let's say we go to the 1300s, and there's a village in Europe, and plague comes along, the Black Plague. And in one family, the woman has 4 children from 4 different men, and the other family, 4 children from the same man. Now, plagues, like all infections, have a genetic component. Some people are more susceptible. So there's a much greater chance of one of the children surviving from a woman that's had multiple partners. And the same is true for men. When men sleep around, they are increasing their likelihood of having their genetics pass on. So we come historically, ancestrally, genetically, from the people who have managed to successfully reproduce, and sleeping around is successful, right? It increases your odds of survival, of passing on your genes. So what we have from the very get-go is genetically a drive, not for happily ever after, but for genetic diversity. Now, on the other side, we can't just have that drive, because if you do just have that, then you never have a family structure. Kids never get raised to the point where they can survive on their own, and that doesn't work. So we live in this intersection between 2 genetic programs. One says, have as many kids as you can, or in as many different partners as you can, and the other is raise a family. And then there's an additional one for women, because for women, it's much more costly to have lots of children, and childbirth is dangerous in the old days, certainly. There's a huge investment in time. So for men and women, it plays out a little differently. So let's talk about it. We live at this intersection between these programs, and if you want to is doing to get its long-term goal, which is genetic diversity. Now, for men, the genetic diversity plays out as something called polygamy, which is the men want as many partners as possible. For women, it's slightly different. For women, it plays out as hypergamy, which means she wants the best partner possible. So that's not to say that men don't want a good woman and women don't necessarily want lots of variety as well, but as a general rule, a man would want to have as many partners as possible, and a woman would upgrade to a better man when possible, as it's following the genetic program for genetic diversity. Now, the way all this plays out is it seems like there's three stages that relationships go through, and there's neurochemicals behind each of them. The first stage is infatuation, and that's where you're head over heels for the other person. And the main chemical associated with this is phenylethylamine, which is 2 steps off methamphetamine. Now, if you become addicted to a substance, it's dependence, but you can become addicted to a person. That's called codependence. So it makes you codependent for a couple of months. And there's a great similarity to what it's like to be in love as to what it's like to take these amphetamines. You make irrational short-term decisions. You don't necessarily think logically or see what's going on. So, as an example, when a couple meet and they're in the throes of infatuation, they're not seeing who they're going to be with, nor are they behaving the way they're going to behave when the marriage is matured. It's a temporary state, and if you judge how you think your marriage is going to be based on these first 6 months, that's not realistic. And as an example, let's say the man snores, and let's say that the woman, let's say the woman burns her food, right? Burns dinner, right? When you're on TEA, the woman cannot hear the man snoring, and the man cannot taste the burnt dinner. It blocks that out.
Mm-hmm.
Now you get to the point of the first stage is to get you to overcome any obstacles in your path, approach anxiety or the challenges of mating and all these things, and then to get pregnant, because with phenylethylamine there's lots of sex. But the DNA only gives us out for about 3 to 6 months, and then it shifts us into the next state. And the next state is oxytocin. This is family bonding. This is a very sweet state to be in. And this is important because if you now have a child, people who are hyped up on amphetamines don't make the best parents. They won't pay attention to the kid. They're too interested in each other. So the DNA then backs us off this and puts us into oxytocin, which is family bonding and love and compassion and generosity and sacrifice and patience and honesty and all these really great things. And that lasts for 2 years, and it's the best state to raise a family in. But after a couple of years, the DNA thinks to itself, or just the way it goes is, okay, we've raised a child, now it's time to go back to genetic diversity again. It doesn't want multiple kids with the same partner because that's not genetic diversity. That's not the program that causes the greatest potential for survival of the gene.
Uh-huh.
And so the next step is it backs the oxytocin off, and it gives you prolactin and cortisol, which would be depression for prolactin and anger or irritation for cortisol. And that's where people either, if it's prolactin, they end up in lives of quiet desperation. It turns off the sex drive because, again, the DNA doesn't want more sex with the same person. Or if it's cortisol, it makes us the opposite of oxytocin. It makes us angry and selfish and uncommunicative and deceptive and aggressive, and sets the stage for breaking up or cheating and then finding somebody new. So, the question, if you think back to these 3 phases, when you're in phenylethylamine, the woman can't hear the man snore, and the man can't taste the burnt food. When you're in oxytocin, it becomes an adorable quirk. Oh yeah, my husband snores. It's adorable. Yeah, my wife burns dinner every once in a while, when she gets preoccupied. Whatever. I move the burnt part to the side of the plate. And when you get to prolactin or cortisol, then it's like, oh my God, if he snores one more time, I'm going to smother him in his sleep. And, oh my God, can this one please stop burning dinner, right? It's the same thing. It's the same behavior, but our ability to process it, our interpretation of it changes based on the neurochemistry that we're having in the moment. So that's the first part of the book. The genetics of how we are being played by our DNA, the neurochemicals it's choreographing for us, the emotions and perceptions we think are ours, and how we perceive our mate, and then how it gets us to just continue this process.
So obviously, we all, if we want a long-term successful marriage, we want to maintain an oxytocin state. So go a little bit into how to keep us there without advancing into prolactin.
Sure. So, right, that's the second half of the book is then, phenylethylamine, oxytocin, prolactin, and cortisol. How do we manage these? So what we need to do is deal with the cortisol and deal with the prolactin. So I'll give you an example about if you put a rat in a cage, it's going to initially be very stressed and it's going to get cortisol and it'll bite at the cage. But eventually when it realizes that it's never getting out of the cage, it goes to prolactin, which gets really depressed. But you put a second rat in that cage, and now the rats are fighting with each other. The prolactin's gone because cortisol displaces prolactin. And this is the phenomenon of makeup sex you see with people, right? Why do people bicker? Think of like an old couple, and Maury is talking to Rose, and Rose says, "What were we arguing about, Maury?" And Maury goes, "I don't remember." And she goes, "No, what was it?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, you didn't like when we went out to dinner with the Schimmelsteins last week." And oh yeah, and then she starts bickering with him. Who in their right mind wants to restart a fight? Why would you intentionally bicker? And what's going on is when people are full of cortisol that have been married for a long time, it feels really depressing. And they intuitively when people have been married for a long time and they get really depressed, they're full of prolactin. And what they intuitively get subconsciously is if they can argue with each other, if they can get angry, the cortisol will come up, it'll displace the prolactin. So bickering is really a subconscious attempt to manage our emotional state from prolactin to cortisol. And then when the cortisol is gone, the sex drive comes back, and then you get the makeup sex.
Right.
So we do manage our emotions and our neurochemistry. We just don't do it consciously. We don't do it for the best possible way. So what would the best possible way be? Well, okay. First off, prolactin has a 50-minute half-life. It's over 3 hours. So, first off, try not to make it. But a couple of things. Cold water, so cold showers can lower prolactin. So can coffee. And the big one is orgasms. Actually, orgasms spike prolactin, and in men, lower testosterone and raise estrogen. So, and also sleeping in will do it. So I'm not saying don't have sex, but if you can learn some of the tantric arts where you learn to have sex without orgasm every once in a while, you won't be spiking your prolactin so much. Now, the cortisol one, typically it shows up under stress, fatigue, or hunger. So, you and your partner should have a good lifestyle where you make sure you don't get hungry and get a good night's sleep and try not to stress out so much, relax, maybe get a massage. But here's the main thing. When you recognize cortisol in you or your partner, don't talk. Don't try to process it. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to work. Don't say a word. And even better, just walk away for a while. Because if you try to, cortisol makes us aggressive and stupid. And aggressive and stupid is not a good mix for communication. So
Agreed.
The first trick is once cortisol is there, try not to trigger it. If you know that you tend to get hungry, don't wait till 11 o'clock to have breakfast, right? But so you organize your life to try to minimize the amount of cortisol that you've got. Once it happens, just don't talk. Just say it's only going to be a fight. Walk away. Come back a few hours later. And if someone's coming to you and they want to talk and they want to fight with you, I would say something like, honey, I will address what's bothering you, but you're having a cortisol spike and I'm not going to do it now, and I'm going for a walk. Or, I'm really upset right now and I shouldn't talk to you because it's not going to come out nicely. So let's talk in a couple of hours. And just not to personalize it, realize, okay, I'm in the throes of this neurochemical. And I'll give you an example of this. There was a story related to me about a doctor who was getting worked on by a dentist. And the dentist injected some painkiller into his jaw. And when you inject painkiller, you often, in this case, add a little adrenaline because it constricts the blood vessels so that the painkiller stays local in the area longer.
Right.
Well, anyway, the dentist made a mistake, and instead of injecting the tissue, got it into the bloodstream, and the doctor got shot with adrenaline into his bloodstream. The doctor understood what had happened. He understood adrenaline just went into his bloodstream, but that did not stop him from having a full-blown panic attack and run out of the chair screaming. Mentally, he understood, I'm not in any danger, there's no tiger, there's no oncoming car, I'm not about to die. But physiologically, that hormone, that neurochemical, that neurotransmitter caused terror in this man until it wore away. So, same thing with these prolactin and cortisol. When these things get in you, that's it. You're in for the ride. You have to wait it out. And don't try to make more of it than it is. Just understand how it happened, and don't try to communicate when you're full of cortisol.
So how does if one recognizes they're in that prolactin cortisol stage, what's the best way to get back into oxytocin other than just remaining quiet?
Well, it's going to wear off over time. You can take phosphatidylserine to lower cortisol, but really what you need to do is to recognize it in yourself and your partner, right? Learn to be able to identify, you know what, that's cortisol. Mm-hmm. And sometimes someone will point it out to you that you're in cortisol, and you'll deny it. Even though you know what it is, you're so argumentative and stupid that you won't come out and say, gosh, yes, I'm having a cortisol spike, right? So you really first have to be able to recognize when it happens. And there's a certain flavor to it, and, you're going to have to find that for yourself. Pull an all-nighter and don't eat. And, if you don't eat long enough, you get irritable, that's cortisol. That's the feeling. So we want to minimize the cortisol and the prolactin. There's some, and if you get into the book, we talk about some other things you can do to manipulate those two neurochemicals. But you brought up a good point. How do we raise oxytocin? Because oxytocin is a state we want to be in. That's the one where you can actually get happily ever after. You can't stay in phenylethylamine, you burn out, and prolactin and cortisol, you wouldn't want to be there. So they're designed to make you break away. So how do you stay in oxytocin? And oxytocin you get by touching. So stroking, squeezing, scratching, anything that a primate does, because the apes, they'll spend 20% of their day grooming each other, but it only takes 2% of the day to actually do it for hygiene. The rest of that is actually just to raise oxytocin because it strengthens bonds socially. So, being nice, kissing, eating and serving food raises oxytocin, any kind of physical touch. And again, if we go back to making love without orgasm, that'll skyrocket oxytocin once you learn how to do that. The half-life for oxytocin is only 3 minutes. So, we're dealing a little bit with loaded dice here. The prolactin and the cortisol stay around for hours, and the oxytocin stays around if you're lucky for a few minutes. So this is why I think the primates learned to be in a state of near perpetual grooming, because they understood that if they wanted to manage that particular state, that it took a lot. So, when you're with your partner, reach out and you're walking by your partner in the living room, touch her on the shoulder, stroke her hair. Take every opportunity you can to make physical contact, because that's how you manage your and your partner's neurochemistry.
Have you validated these stages, the oxytocin, prolactin? How did you come up with this or understand it? Was it validation through blood tests, or how did you get that information?
Yeah, this is, studying all sorts of things. This is studying primate behavior. It was studying neurochemistry in healthy people, the neurochemistry, and it's just, it was months of reading textbooks and medical journals, and finally this came out as a model that helped me understand it. And I'm not saying that this is the correct model. It's just, for me, working from this perspective simplifies it and helps me figure out how to manage it most efficiently.
Have you seen these definite stages in your life and how to move from one stage to another?
Oh, absolutely. And not only did I see it looking back in previous relationships, you all see it in relationships now. So, we all want to find our soulmate. And, the people who go from relationship to relationship every 3 to 6 months, these are people that think infatuation is love. And it's a kind of love. But they don't get to oxytocin. And if you don't get to oxytocin, then you don't get to the kind of place where not only are you on your best behavior, but the imperfections of your partner become adorable quirks. Mm-hmm. And that's really the key to making long-term relationships. You be a good person, and to the degree that you or your partner don't, live up to the best qualities of themselves, the other person is able to be like, all right, you know what, they've got a little cortisol, they've got a little prolactin, whatever, it'll pass, I love them.
Wow, very, very interesting. And if more people knew this, more relationships would be successful and long-lasting for sure.
Well, I think it's important to have realistic ideas of what a relationship is. If we think that unless we're completely infatuated and never argue that we're not with our soulmate or we're not in a good relationship, that's not accurate, because that's something that Disney, that's a fairy tale. But and until we understand that not only do we have our own imperfections to deal with and imperfections of our partners, but we've got this genetic drive operating in the background, working against long-term relationships. Mm-hmm. So you could do it, but you have to understand the forces at play.
Right. Wow, I've always been impressed at your research and your knowledge and your ability to break things down to resolve not only health issues, but also societal issues. And so very, very good information. I know you're always working on a number of things. Could you just briefly list a couple of things that you're presently working on that maybe we can have other potential podcasts?
Well, the Four Gifts was the first of 4 books or essays that I wrote. The second one was called An Invitation to Kingship. It was an understanding of, let me phrase this, in the same way that genetics trick people into having, in the same way that there's a genetic drive that works against long-term relationships, there's a genetic drive that pushes 95% of men to be followers rather than leaders. Mm-hmm. And at the end of book 1, what I realized is that part of what most women want to be satisfied is a man with leadership capacity, right? And if you don't have that as a man, then your woman's never really going to be satisfied the way she could be. Mm-hmm. So as a man, if you want your woman to be happy, you've got to learn to manifest this leadership capacity. But again, genetically, we're not driven for that, because in a pack of animals, you need 1 leader to 19 followers. So that's the ratio, 20 to 1. And too many leaders or too many followers, and the pack kind of gets chaotic. So genetically, we're driven, most men, to become followers. But that also works against good relationships. So the second book was taking a look at what is it that leaders of men have. What are their mannerisms, their behaviors, their ways of seeing the world and solving problems? And of course, women are welcome to go through what can be a male-dominated society, but it'll help them both raise boys that they have, as well as understand their own man better and what kind of man they might want. The third book goes into the mind about the different kinds of emotions we have and how to work with them in a way that makes them more pleasant to be around. So, for instance, how do you turn anger into inconvenience? How do you turn sadness into disappointment? How do you work with the narratives of the mind? And the last book, which was just finished, is based on near-death experiences. As a result of modern medical resuscitative techniques, so many people are coming back from the death experience with stories to tell. And the sheer number of these is estimated up to 15% of people will have a near-death experience in their lifetime. And the similarities, regardless of sex, age, culture, religion, location, lends credibility, especially since these experiences are often happening in a total absence of brainwaves. So there's some experience that is coming that people who have near-death experiences are able to share with us. And the third book was, well, if what they're saying is true and life is a school, then what are the lessons that I'm here to learn based on what these people are reporting? And so that third book, the fourth book, was kind of lessons from the afterlife.
Mm-hmm. And how can people, you said they're free, how can people get access to these books?
If you go to www.spiritualsecretagent.com, just download them. There's no charge.
Okay. And what's the best way to get a hold of you if people want to find out more, and especially your products? I know your products are phenomenal products.
Thank you. If you go to RemedyLink, RemedyLink.com, the products are there, and contact numbers are there, and feel free to email me or call me if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you very much. I've always been thrilled at the information that you are imparting, you're researching, because I know it helps everybody in their life. So I want to thank you not only for me, but also for my listeners. This will help them very much. I want to thank you very much, Spencer, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me on, Bob. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Vital 100. Check out our website at vital100wellness.com for more episodes, blogs, supplements, and more. If you have questions for Dr. Bob, or if you have feedback or recommendations for the podcast, please send an email to info@vital100wellness.com.